Alright, this is another video on death and why it's kind of paradoxical to compare death with life. You know, comparing life with death is like comparing duality with non-duality, because life is dualistic and death is non-dualistic. But the thing is, you cannot compare duality with non-duality, because you can only compare dualities with each other. You can only compare plus with minus, but non-duality is the absence of plus and minus. So you cannot compare plus and minus with the absence of plus and minus. Within a duality, you have two things which are contrasting each other, so you are able to compare these two different things with each other. But within non-duality, there are no contrasts. So non-duality cannot form a contrast with anything else, because within itself it has no contrasts. Okay, so this should sound like a logical proof that duality and non-duality are incomparable. So similarly, within death, there are no contrasts. Within unconsciousness, there are no contrasts. Death is the total absence of everything, so it's ultimately nothing. But you cannot use nothing itself to compare it with something, right? This should make absolute sense. So logically, death itself cannot be compared with life because you cannot compare something with nothing. Now I'm talking about death itself or nothing itself. So I'm not talking about the idea of death or the idea of nothing, because an idea is still something. So if two things are not comparable, then there exists no difference between the two. If there was a difference, then you would be able to compare them with each other. So incomparability means the absence of a difference. Okay, so now here comes my paradoxical claim that logically there is no difference between life and death, as you are unable to compare something with nothing. Yes, we are able to make a difference between the two as an idea, but the idea of nothing is still something. So basically you are comparing the idea of something with the idea of nothing, which is still something. So you are just comparing something with something else, but you are not comparing something with actual nothingness. Okay, so if you understand this, then you understand that you cannot make a difference between life and death itself. Now I know this sounds really absurd from an antinatalist point of view, to say that it doesn't matter whether you are alive or dead because there is no difference between life and death. Now I just want you to know that this is what logic is leading me towards. This is not something I want to believe in a subjective way. This has nothing to do with what I want. This is what happens when I follow logic. Yet of course at the same time logic has led me to antinatalism. It has led me to non-existence as the absolute truth. And at the same time, this absolute truth, which is non-existence, is just not comparable with anything that we know of. So in reality, there is ultimately no difference between something and nothing, because again, nothing itself cannot be used to compare it with something else. And if you think differently, then please prove to me how it is possible to compare something with absolutely nothing. And again, you cannot use the idea or or the theory behind nothingness, because that is also something. Okay, and so what with experience? What with suffering? How can there be no difference? Life and death are supposed to be each other's opposite, yet when you think about it, it seems to be impossible to make a difference between the two. Well, here is something else to understand. Within death, nothing happens. Within nothingness, nothing can take place. There cannot be something within nothing. So logically, it is impossible to be inside nothingness, because nothingness is the absence of being. You cannot manifest yourself in nothingness. You cannot be in there. So you will never enter nothingness. When you die, you will not be inside nothingness. No, when you die, being itself, in the sense of to be something, that will be gone. You will lose your being. You won't be anymore. Nothingness is the absence of being. So if you follow this logic, then you will never be dead, because death is the absence of being. So you can't be dead, with a great emphasis on be. But you will neither be alive. So what now? Well, death is a paradox. You will die, but you cannot be dead. To be or not to be, that's the question. Well, when you are dead, you will neither be nor not be, because death is non-dual. Okay, so here is the ultimate thing. There is no difference between life and death, yet at the same time they are completely each other's opposite. So to be alive is to be, and being able to think about not to be. So this is dualistic. And to be dead is neither to be nor not to be. And this is non-dualistic. So it's to be or not to be versus neither to be nor not to be, or duality versus non-duality. And in this sense they are each other's opposite. But again, non-duality is not comparable with duality, because non-duality is neither something nor nothing, and we can only compare something with something else. So logically, you cannot make a difference between duality and non-duality. So I can only conclude that even though they are each other's opposite within the context of dualistic thinking, at the same time they are identical within the context of non-dualistic thinking. This is ultimately paradoxical, but time and time again, this is where logic is leading me towards. And now my final statement. When you die, neither something nor nothing is going to happen. You are not going to be inside something, and you are not going to be inside nothingness. This means that you are not going to notice any difference between being alive and being dead when you are actually dead. So within death itself, it's impossible to define death. So logically, death does not exist for logic. But when logic and thinking goes away, actual death will be present. So logic is pointing to death itself, but for logic there can be no death because it's not comparable with life. And the only way for death to be real without logical contradiction is to end all logic. And as always, this is highly nonsensical, impossible to wrap your mind around, so your logic will not like this, and so you will probably be like, well, no, death does exist. There is no paradox. It's perfectly logical. Just stop this mysterious woo-woo stuff. Well, yeah, but I still hope that I have provided some reasonable arguments. And so that's it.